Welcome to Commas.
Commas is all things tech.
You see culture and technology coming together.
Life hacks.
The practicality right now and the inefficiency of the internet of buying and selling stuff is extraordinary.
Entrepreneurship advice.
I think the first thing is you got to understand your business inside out.
Love and tech.
We've almost reduced dating to kind of this very momentary snap of a person.
It's going to be a fire show.
I have yet to see something these days that's truly differentiated.
New advice and new inspiration every show.
It really is about the next generation of creatives going faster, further than we did.
And now, Sequoia Blodgett.
Now let's start stacking them commas.
In this episode, we're going to take a deep dive into failure. Suit up because it's about to go down.
Entrepreneurship advice. Learn from the hottest and most successful investors, founders, and innovators in the game.
Determine your greatness.
It's time to get your knowledge up.
Okay, for sure.
What's poppin'? We've got special guest Dave Salvant, founder of Squire, a platform that allows you to discover and book the best barbers in your city on the line. What is good, Dave? How's it going?
Everything's good. Can't complain. Just out here grinding, every day. Something different, but just out here grinding.
I feel that. So how did you break into tech, or how did you start your career in tech?
Well, that's a very interesting story. So my background is in financial services. So prior to starting Squire, I was working at JP Morgan, an insurance company called AXA. So tech wasn't, in my direct kind of like compass. But it was something that I was always into, and entrepreneurship in general. So when I looked at the landscape, it's like, how do I create, wealth for myself and my family? The only way to do that on an exponential level is technology and entrepreneurship. So that's what made me say, hey, Dave, you're young, you're relatively young, you're working hard, working 100-hour week. Why not try to work for yourself in some capacity? And then, that's when I first started thinking about, how can I create something that I'm passionate about, that other people share the same, energy?
Did you say 100-hour week?
Yeah, 100-hour weeks. Yeah, I mean, it's finance in New York City, so like you work a lot.
That's insane. So why Squire? What made you decide to say, okay, this is, well, first of all, was that your first startup, or was that something?
Yeah, it was essentially our first startup. Yeah, we kicked around a few other ideas, but Squire is what, we settled on. And it's in part to me being a professional in New York City. We had to get, a haircut every couple of weeks, if not every week. And that process was broken. Number one, you had to hire or text your barber. You had to bring cash, and you had to sit down and wait. Now, this is 2015. Mm-hmm. So essentially, that process was not as efficient as I thought it should be. And that's when things like Uber started getting going, really getting traction, and, Airbnb and what have you. And they were just like, hey, this industry, which is, archaic, should be readily improved with the input of technology. So that's what the idea kind of like started to take ground. But how can I solve for this consumer? How can I solve for myself to make this experience better than I had to do all the time?
And did you bootstrap first, or what was that like?
I mean, it was tough. Bootstrap, it's difficult. And we did it for about 6 months, and then we were lucky enough to receive some angel investment, and then we were lucky enough to receive more investment and get into Y Combinator, and on and so on. So I think bootstrap is hard, but it's required. No one's going to invest in your hobby, so you have to show some sort of dedication to your business before someone is going to, actually invest in it. So we bootstrapped for about 6 months, and then we were very fortunate to find some people that actually believed in what we were doing.
Right. And then what did Y Combinator do for your company?
Y Combinator is great. I mean, it's like, okay, so when you think about entrepreneurship and startups and tech, the most talented company, talented or smartest or whatever you want to call it, doesn't always win. What wins, what separates, the winners from losers is resources and network and the ability to achieve things faster than other people. And Y Combinator is a catalyst for that because it allows you to get so much resources so quickly, so much access to folks that have built really successful companies. And just like asking a question on their, blog with all the founders, now the 3,000, somebody probably spent 1,000, 1,500 hours working on the same problem they can answer the question in 10 minutes. That just saves you that much time of figuring it out. And when you're building something, the name of the game is speed. And what you have to do is you have to learn and reiterate fast, and you'll ask those important questions and get feedback, not from, not only your customers, but other people that have done it before. So that's the value of Y Combinator. It's just the network and the ability to ask questions to this really high level performing group of individuals.
Right. And what would you say was the hardest part of building your company?
I mean, I would say in building a company, especially, you have to be tenacious. You have to be really, really, really tenacious, not letting go of your ideals. Just, this is right. You have to be conviction. And there's times when, our bank account was negative for 3-4 weeks, no money, that happens. And you really, when you reach those points, when you are at those lows, you have to just remember why you're doing it, and you have to have that conviction to keep going forward. So I would say, Squire, when things are going well, it's good to be a startup, as an entrepreneur, and it gets kind of glorified on social media.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is great, but a lot of people don't see the pitfalls and the other things that are happening on the other side.
So behind the scenes, what do you think are some of those things that you were like, oh my God, I wish I could have done this differently once you got past that?
I mean, it's just, finding better people to work with. Neither my co-founder or myself are technical. We went through some iterations with the technical, lead / other technical person to kind of build a product. And, that was a learning idea, when you smell smoke, there's often fire, So just be able to hey, something's not right here. The product's not being built correctly. It's not on schedule. This shouldn't be taking long. You have to make decisive action. And I feel like if you make decisive action earlier, it saves a lot of time. I think we wasted about 6 to 8 months just by delaying inevitable because we weren't confident that we had the resources or the expertise to build this outside of that person. But I would say, it's cliche, but you as an entrepreneur, you really have to trust your instincts. You really have to say, hey, if something's not right, you need to fix it, and you be decisive. Either way, you're going to learn something. If you're decisive and you're wrong, you'll learn something. If you're decisive and you're right, you save a lot of time. And the most important thing about this is time.
So I seen, your company grow from one iteration to several other iterations, and now it's a totally different kind of platform. What do you think it'll be in the next 5 years?
You got to look at your customers. When we first started, we thought we would buy this platform that we would just build a kind of a marketplace where customers would download the app and find barbers and book appointments, and the barber would use our product and stuff like that, and it would go fast and it go viral and what have you. But that didn't happen. What you have to do as an entrepreneur, you have to be adaptive to what your clients are saying, because your clients and your customers are actually the ones paying and using your product. What we realized is that product, that marketplace, that mobile app, it didn't work. And we really had to look at the landscape and look at what was in front of us and really build a product that served our customers. So we built a full ERP platform. And for folks who don't know, it's enterprise resource product. So it's everything. So it's from soup to nuts, point of sale, your scheduling, your CRM, customer relationship management, your payroll, all in one product. So now we're the operating system of that business. So it allows us to be a real sticky product. It allows us to sell supply so we don't have to worry about the demand. And it allows us to, really, really add a lot of value for our clients to the point where, we've heard things like, thank you, this actually has allowed me to spend more time with my family. The best thing to do as an entrepreneur when you're first starting out is listen to your customers and do things that don't scale. Feedback, your customers will tell you what they want, and if they don't tell you what they want and your product has no fit in the market and it's not a good product, so your customers will dictate what you do.
Were you afraid to make that iteration? Because, that's a massive change, right? You went from a B2B or a B2C to a B2B company. So I imagine that cost a lot too. So
it did cost a lot, but, it's the reason why we're here. It's the reason why Squire's alive today. It was a pivot. We still realized that it was demand for our product, but way the market we went after first is the business. I think over time in the future, we will shift to the customer side, but we're laser focused on building products and services for the folks that are actually using this every single day.
So how did you build out your relationships? Because I remember, I think it was like last week, I was going to put something on Instagram and I went to book and it was like, oh, book something on Squire. And I was like, huh? So how did you end up brokering that relationship with IG?
Actually, this was somebody in the YC network that used to work at Facebook that connected me with somebody at Facebook who ran this product. So we've been trying to do that for a long time. But, if you don't know anyone or you're not an insider, it's really hard to go through the other methods. You have to know someone. That's the game. The game is knowing people that can add value, and you add value to them. I don't care what education you have. It's people that add value are the most successful people in the world. People who are saying, hey, how can I help this person that's going to help me again back in the future? And that's that. It's not like your network is super, super important, especially if you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to get stuff done. I think people don't put enough thought into that. It's like really work on developing your soft skills. Just make sure you're not doing stuff selfishly out of, what I'm going to get out of this. I had a conversation with somebody the other day and I was like, hey, what do you think about this? And that person said, what's in it for me? I'm like, okay, I know what type of person you are and I'm not going to deal with this. Because if you're looking at it like through that lens, then I know that you're not sophisticated enough to add value in the future. I'm going off on a little tangent, but just to go back to your question, I think we just have to focus on what's important and focus on, goals ahead.
No, I think you should stay on that tangent a little bit because I think people really don't understand that, right? Like a lot of entrepreneurs will come out and they're like, well, how can I get to this certain point? Or how do I get these customers to buy into me? And like, they don't understand offering value to the market. So let's talk a little bit more about that. What are some other ways that you suggest that entrepreneurs add value?
Okay, so if I come to you, right, and I say, hey, look, I'm trying to do something, blah, blah, blah. Can you help me with this? I'm like, time is very finite, and I'm not as successful as I wish to become, but time is finite. And, you're helping people every day. I understand, it just doesn't work. You have to focus on your own thing. Somebody else has to focus on their own thing. So they can't perpetually be helping people. It doesn't work like that. But if you add value first, people automatically feel indebted to you to return the favor. That's super important. So if you say, hey, you hear somebody's like, I need to connect with this person, and not directly, oh, I know that, let me connect you. Boom. You already added value. So in that person's mind, there's somebody that I want to make sure that I do something to enhance this person's life because they helped me out. That's human nature. Now, unless you're a grimy person, you're going to want to do that.
I think that's great advice for people who are out there because I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs will come to me and they'll be like, hey, can you mentor me or can you? And I'm like, I'm not about to be sitting here all day just telling you all the things that it took me 4 or 5 plus years to learn. You know what I mean? I think there's definitely levels to that. So what was that process like of you actually raising funds for the company?
The process was a bit of a couple of things. Number one is, we raised a few $1 million at this point, but it was a mix of luck and, opportunity. But what is luck? Opportunity means preparation. So we were fortunate. We met some angel investors. We met some guys that really believed in what we were doing. And we were able to raise, significant financing to get our product off the ground. And at that point, we probably had wireframes, a little more than wireframe. But, that's an anomaly. That doesn't happen to African American founders. I'm pretty sure of it. So that's when I say we were lucky.
Yeah, you should see my face when you said wireframes. I'm like, wait, a couple million on some wireframes? So
no. It was a couple thousand on some wireframes.
Oh, okay. I was like, huh?
A couple thousand on some wireframes. So
But what would you say equated to you raising? Do you think that was a traction situation? Do you think that was because you had a strong network? How would you equate that?
That was definitely network and definitely, just being tenacious. And the reason why I keep on coming back to this tenacious words is because that is what you need to be successful, I feel, I mean, the definition of that is not readily relinquish a position, principle, or course of action. You have to be that way. You have to, because if you're not, you will be knocked off balance. You will go off course. You will let the naysayers and the doubters put doubt in your mind. You have to be focused like that. That's what's going to keep you going when those really low points of this battle. It's just that, willingness to risk it all and willingness to, this is everything. That's what's going to make you successful. Raising money, it's not the end goal. I feel like too much emphasis is put on raising money. The money is a tool to build a bigger, better business that ultimately doesn't need money. Money is just resources for growth. So, too many people are like, I'll raise X amount of money, X amount of that, but it's validity. But at the same time, it could be a distraction. You got to do it. You have to do it. But, if you build a really successful company, you own more of it. And then when you sell it or when you exit, you get to keep more of it. I do realize that you needed to get to certain benchmarks and certain goals. So it's unnecessary evil.
I love that you said that. So knowing all that you know now, what's one thing that you would have done differently?
Knowing everything I've done now, I wouldn't have changed anything because you learn from what you've done. So, and that's why second and third time entrepreneurs are much better than first time entrepreneurs because they just learned everything the first time. And they learned everything and they can just go much faster because they just know what to do. Like if I was starting a company today, I'll get to my point probably 3-4x faster.
Right.
Because I just know where to go. I just know what to look for. I know what type of people to hire. I know what type of goals to set. I know how to manage better. So, I think I wouldn't change anything because I think I'm a better entrepreneur now because I've went through this process.
So how do you find work-life balance in the mix of all this? Because I know that you said you spent 100 hours a week working.
No. When I was in finance, like that was the worst schedule. When I was working in finance, I don't spend 100 hours a week, but I do try to balance it as much as I can. But you're always on. You can never really go on vacation. You go out, it just becomes your life. Everything revolves around it. It's not something where you can go check out and just don't think about it. Like you have like a 9 to 5. It's just not. If you're that type person, it's not for you because you're always thinking about it, constantly thinking about how you can improve it. It's like your child. You just think about it so much. People go into entrepreneur for one or two things, I think. Number one, they try to improve their lives somehow, whether it be financially, whether it be through a service. That's the number one reason why people go into entrepreneurship. Or number two is they don't want to work for anyone. They want to be their own boss. They want to, control their narrative more or less. But with those two things, you got to give up something. The thing that you often have to give up is your free time. If you want to have free time, then go get a 9 to 5 or go work for a company. But if you're going to be an entrepreneur or technology is entrepreneur, be prepared to take a lot of that weight because at the end of the day, the buck stops with you and you have to get shit done.
That's right.
So, if it's not for you, if you want to, I think too much glorification, too much, everyone sees a successful entrepreneur. But, there's a lot of failures, and most people fail. And most people aren't able to raise money. And most people quit. And most people give up. You just often see the successes. But, it's real grim out there. It's real grim.
That's real. It's real in these streets. So how do people find Squire or you?
They can find me on Instagram, Twitter. I'm just Dave, D-A-V-E, Salvant, S-A-L-V-A-N-T, both Twitter and Instagram. A little more active on Instagram. But that's the way to find me. And Squire is just Get Squire, G-E-T, S-Q-U-I-R-E. on both Instagram and Twitter as well.
Okay, how do you deal with failure? Failure is an interesting concept. I love failure. Like, I love failure because every time I fail, I learn. So for me, when I think about failure, when I was directing commercials, music videos in the entertainment industry, failure was always something that was like a negative. It was like, oh, you didn't do this, so you failed, or this video never made it to air, so you failed, and like all these things. And I was just thinking about that recently. There's a ton of videos that I shot. You guys will never see the light of day. And I still had a successful career, right? Like, I still had a good run in that industry. And then coming into tech, technically my first startup is considered a failure. But for me, I learned so much going into that startup and having a company and getting it off the ground that it wasn't like, oh my gosh, this is a bad thing. I just think you need to reassess your definition of what failure is and then put it to a different definition. Like, for me now, when someone's like, oh, you failed, I'm like excited about it. And I didn't even know that until I had moved to Silicon Valley and I was sitting, there was like a round table, not round table, we were all outside by the pool actually. It was like 5-10 of us. And we're sitting around and Tim Draper is talking to us all. And we're talking about failure. And he was like, no, like, when you fail, you learn. Like, that's not a bad thing. Like, where is this coming from? And it was so interesting because my perspective changed so much. When I thought about failure before, it was always a negative. And then when he said that, it just like, all of a sudden, it was like it all just clicked for me. It was like, oh, snap. Like, all these years I've been thinking failure is a bad thing, but failure's not. Like, it's actually a really good thing to embrace. So I love failure. Like, every time I fail, I'm like, oh my God, okay, what did I learn? What can I do differently? And I just change things, right? I just don't think about it in a negative sense. I've pulled some references from both the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, and Google and how they deal with failure and incorporate into their company culture. So we'll get to both of those things. But the key thing that I think that we need to know leading into this is don't be a know-it-all, be a learn-it-all, right? When you go into this process, you want to make sure that you're consistently learning. And the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, says that in the most beautiful way possible, I think, right? You want to make sure that you're learning all the time. And when you understand this concept, it's easy to switch your focus. So instead of limiting yourself and becoming overly concerned with how people view you and see you, your primary concern is one of growth. So your mistakes no longer look like failures, rather they're learning opportunities, right? And so let's dive into this concept just a little bit more and understand how the CEO of Microsoft embeds this into his company culture. Some people call it rapid experimentation, but more importantly, we call it hypothesis testing. So instead of saying, I have an idea, what if you said, I have a new hypothesis? Let's go test it, see if it's valid, ask how quickly we can validate it. And if it's not valid, we move on to the next one, right? There's no harm in claiming failure if the hypothesis doesn't work. So you remove that stigma. And being able to come up with new ways of doing things, new innovations, and new ways of framing what failure is and what success is, and how one achieves the success, there's no harm in claiming failure if the hypothesis doesn't work. Being able to come up with new ways of doing things, new ways of framing what failure is and what success is brings you to a different conclusion. So how does one achieve that success? It's through a series of failures, through a series of hypothesis testing. And to Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, again, that is what he believes is the real pursuit. So test the hypothesis. If it works, figure out how to make it better. If it doesn't, move on to the next idea. It's really that simple. And Google has a similar approach. So what Google believes is to truly benefit from failure, you need a process in place to learn from the mistakes, or you will continue to repeat them. So what Google believes is that in order to truly benefit from failure, you need a process in place to learn from your mistakes, or it's very likely that you're going to repeat those mistakes, right? So additionally, these failures may be simply symptoms of a much bigger problem. And the only way you can assess that is by looking at that failure and understanding what it is and either growing from it, or even worse, if you don't address it, it becomes a bigger issue. So internally, they've come up with a 3-step process called the postmortem for documenting and learning from these mistakes. And so the first step is to identify the most important problems. So essentially, a postmortem is the process their team undertakes to reflect on the learnings from their most significant undesirable events. So not every incident requires a postmortem. So that's what they figure out in the first step. They make sure that it's actually a problem that they actually need to go through this postmortem for. So some of those issues could be disruptions of the service, data integrity impacts, slow customer resolutions, or failed error detections. And what they do is they ask themselves, what do I define as a major problem? So they figure out what that major problem is first, and they see if it's necessary to go through this postmortem process. So you may not always know until you see it, which is fine, but you got to figure out what it is, right? So you use those problems to help you identify future failures that are similar. And the idea is to be preventative. So once they figure out what the specific problem is, then they create a record. So they create a written document, basically documenting exactly what happened, why it happened, what was its impact, how the issue was mitigated or resolved, and what they'll do to prevent the incident from reoccurring. Additionally, Google will also suggest very specific questions like what went well, what didn't go well, where did they get lucky in the solution, and what can they do differently the next time. So really, the goal for them is to analyze the data, and then they'll spend 30 to 60 minutes actually exploring the incident and taking the time to learn now and save time for the future. So instead of waiting for something to happen again, they make sure they nip it in the bud right away. And so thirdly, from that, they want to promote growth and not blame, which I think is amazing. I feel like every single company should adopt this structure. So by removing blame from the postmortem, they enable their team members to feel a greater psychological safety to escalate the issues without fear. And that's so important because when people feel fear, they don't want to act, right? And so the reason Google's been able to iterate so much is because they remove that fear, right? And so their team members feel psychologically safe to say whatever the problem is. They don't feel like they're going to be punished for it. And when they make those mistakes, they know for a fact that there's going to be a solution and they're going to work to a solution and not be blamed for it. So there's a trust factor there. So Google does not play the blame game, which allows them to iterate super fast. And it allows them to focus on improving and learning. So what they've done is they've repositioned the failures as an opportunity for growth and development rather than a setback. And I think that is so important. If you guys have companies, please consider adopting this type of methodology because it helps so much for the company to grow and scale very quickly because people are going to make mistakes. It's inevitable, right? But how do you learn from those mistakes and how do you build from those mistakes instead of blaming somebody for those mistakes and staying focused? So really, it's just a repositioning of your focus. And then once you make that happen, then you can grow, right? And so I think that's super important to understand. So here are some strategies Entrepreneur.com put out a while ago that I feel like are very important in the implementation of failure and how to deal with it when it arises. So first thing is just be prepared. Just know that you're going to fail at some point, right? You don't need a full contingency plan. It's not that serious, but be mentally prepared for failing. And so when the difficult times do hit, you're ready, right? You've already put in whatever that is that you need to put in, whether that be having allocated additional resources, meaning you have a couple of months worth of cash flow in order to make sure that you are prepared for when ish hits the fan, right? So that's something that you should totally focus on. Make sure you're planning ahead of time. So when those hard times do hit, when you least expect it, you actually have a plan. So number 2, find what can build your energy back up. Because, when you fail, you're going to feel a certain way. That's just how it works, right? It's ego, whatever it is, you're going to feel bad about it, right? So what are you doing in order to make sure that you don't stay off track for a really long time? So is that exercise? Are you spending time with people that you care about? How are you getting that positive energy back into your life? And how are you hitting that reset button? So really focus on what you need to do when that issue arises, right? And then going back to, making sure that with energy, you're not making emotional decisions, right? Because a lot of times, like Dave pointed out in his interview, when he failed, had he been emotional about Squire and saying, hey, this isn't working as a B2C service. We created this entire platform. It took tons of time, tons of energy, tons of money, tons of resources. I'm done. Had he said that, being emotional from the situation, it could have been detrimental to the company. But he was rational about his thought process. And he said, you know what? It didn't work. So what do our customers want and how can we make this work for our customers? The customers wanted a B2B platform. They wanted something that they could actually help to execute internally for their business. And so he said, we're going to create that. And so that was a rational decision on his part and it saved his company. So make sure when you guys hit that point that you're actually thinking rational and you're not making emotional choices. And that will prevent problems from compounding in the end. Having a strong support network is so important. So surrounding yourself with successful friends, family, mentors, advisors, people who have been through this before because it gets so difficult, right? The worst thing you can do is isolate yourself during hard times because you don't know what you don't know. And so what will happen is humans are creatures of habit. So we're going to ruminate over and over and over into our thoughts, which aren't going to allow us to progress forward. So you want a support system, a support network that will have some solutions for you to kind of help you move out of that funk and keep your spirits high and keep you moving forward with your company. And of course, like I said, these people are great support systems, but they're actually really great outlets for advice and processing important decisions. So they can be a sounding board as well. So make sure that that's something that you implement. Reevaluating your situation. So sometimes people just aren't, excited about their company. That's the best way I can say it. Some people just are like, hey, I want to do this. And their motive isn't that they're passionate about their company. Their motive is something completely different, which is not in alignment. So essentially, they start to build out these companies. And when it gets really difficult, they just want to quit because it was never in alignment to begin with. So basically, you need to really ask yourself if your company failed because it's drastically underperforming. Why? What happened? Is it because you didn't put in the necessary work in order to make it successful? You have to ask yourself these things because persevering through failure is critically important, but that doesn't mean that you should tell yourself you have to be failing often and a lot because there's a reason. If you're failing so much and it becomes so consistent, yeah, you're going to fail every now and again. But if it's like a consistent failure, you got to really analyze what's going on with you internally because sometimes, actually, most times, the answer is within yourself and it has nothing to do with the outside environment that's around you, right? Because you're going to make sure that that outside environment is right. So be honest with yourself. Being honest will save you a significant amount of energy and time and happiness, right? If this isn't something that you're excited about, just move on. It's okay. And also not taking yourself too seriously. Sometimes it feels like the end of the world when we fail. It feels very destitute. It feels very depressing. It feels like all these adjectives that you get when this failure happens. And in some cases, these failures are more extreme than others, so your emotions are going to be very different, right? But with that being said, putting your situation in context with the grand scheme of things is very relieving. I mean, failure is a part of life. I mean, you have to understand that, digest it, embrace it, and understand that during those difficult times, it may seem in the moment that that's it, but really everything will be all right. It's just you have to be patient and you have to persevere. And that's literally how you get through that. I really like this one. So number 7, one of the keys that I think a lot of people do when it comes to failure is they take it really personal. It is not personal. It's not personal to you. It's not personal to, your character, none of that. So you have to learn to disassociate the failure from yourself as a person. Right? So if the company's failing, it's really easy to blame yourself and to think that it's because of you. But in many cases, that's not it, right? It could be so many other factors that are completely out of your control. So letting yourself become strongly attached to that failure will make handling it a lot more difficult. So instead, understand and recognize it and continue to allow your life to move forward. Don't ruminate over it. Don't feel like you're a bad person because of it. Just understand that it happened and you have to move forward. And that goes into number 8, which is don't dwell on it. Looking back in history, everyone that has accomplished significant work has failed. J.K. Rowling had Harry Potter books turned down by so many publishers before she was actually published. Albert Einstein got rejected time and time again when pursuing a career as a professor. And so with these things, they didn't let that stop them. Losing happens to everybody, and getting down about it is not going to be productive. It's not going to help you accomplish anything. Instead, stay forward thinking, stay focused, and that will enable you to get past the problem and work toward making the necessary changes that you need in order to be successful. And learn from it. Moving on is absolutely necessary, but asking yourself why you failed is equally important. It's insanely important because insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, right? So if you're not learning from these mistakes, you are literally just repeating it over and over. So how can you be better next time is literally one of the most informative parts of failing. It's difficult to ask these hard questions and deal with them in the moment, but they absolutely have to be addressed. And by doing so, you will inevitably prevent yourself from making that same mistake again. So address those failures head on. It is so important. And lastly, understand what you're getting yourself into. Entrepreneurship is not a game and it is not for everyone. As an entrepreneur, you're going to face failure. That's the name of the game. If you're looking for a safe life without many ups and downs, or you have a hard time handling failure, then starting a company may not be for you, and that is absolutely fine. So get out there, test it out, fail fast, and see where you fall in the spectrum. And if it's for you, that's amazing. And if it's not, that's cool too.
Yo.
Love, life, and tech.
With Sequoia Blonde Jet.
Just part of our culture.
Because balance is real between the swipe culture, mental health, personal growth, career, and just about everything in between.
Just keeping it real.
It's a lifestyle.
Incredible vibes, incredible people.
Love,
Life,
and tech.
So when we first launched Commas, we were talking about dating apps, and we had Dr. Peace Amati on the show. And one of the apps that we dived into was called The League. So one of our listeners who had been searching for the right dating app was intrigued by our discussion on The League and decided to try it out. We had him on the show, and he let us know his progress and what he discovered by joining the app. Well, he's back to tell us whether he's found success or failure. Well, welcome back. I'm super excited to have you, and I really want to know what's been going on.
Well, unfortunately, I have met with failure on The League.
Really? Tell me about this.
The League, in the beginning, I really liked the metrics on how it would go about pairing me with different people, because it was very interesting how they kind of figured out like what would connect us. In the beginning, I kind of felt like, wow, this works. And and I met a couple people and we're cool, but there were no sparks. And then I started to notice after a while on the league, it seemed like they were pairing me with people that seemed more random. And then I started seeing people that I had been matched up with or had been, likened to on other apps. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm starting to see some of the same people that I've seen on, say, Match.com that I didn't connect with there, or, Plenty of Fish, Zeus, any of the apps. And so for me, I don't know. It's just the league has gotten to be a bit stagnant as far as me actually seeing someone who I'm like, hey, their profile is hot. I've actually gotten to the point where I'm just like randomly saying yes, just because I want to see what the response will be.
So do you think that app is oversaturated? Like the app world, the dating app world specifically is an oversaturated space. And that's maybe why you're seeing more people from these other platforms?
Yes. And I think it's probably because some of the other apps we've all kind of met with failure. And so with the league is fresh in its introduction, and maybe it's the waiting period and the verification process that you have to go through that makes this one more intriguing and more exciting. So you feel like, wow, I've finally been accepted. I'm there. I've crossed over into the realm of like where real people looking to date, are. And I'm like, well, I didn't connect with you on Match. I don't know how I would connect with you here. So I don't know. I found myself a little frustrated.
I think that's a really interesting observation, though, because a lot of people forget that dating apps are actually businesses. So in the lead's case, just like any other app platform, I feel like they're going to accept who applies because they're a business and they need the quantity. And even though they were positioned for quality, at some point they've got to scale, right? Mm-hmm. So it may be something that the league has to go back and kind of reevaluate for their customers and kind of see, okay, how do we keep the quality? Maybe it's a higher price point. Maybe it's, giving a couple more feature sets that's going to give you a little more quality, because what happens in my kind of experience and what I feel like is they have to keep up with the Joneses. They have to keep up with the Tinders of the world who has millions and millions of people, prospects on the app. They have to keep up with the Hinges of the world, these other kind of forward-thinking applications. And essentially when the league came out, they were that very exclusive kind of club-esque type of feel. And I think that they may need to reposition the way that they think about engaging their quality of customer, because it's a different quality of customer. It's like, do you want the Honda or do you want the Rolls Royce? Well, if you're going to get the Rolls Royce, you may have to pay a little bit more for the Rolls Royce, right? So you may have to pay for the perks. So I think that maybe it's not a personal thing to you, but I think that there's something to be said about the business model. And I know that the league's been iterating, because I remember when Amanda, the CEO, sent out an email to her customer base like, hey, we're making some changes. So it could be essentially that they're still trying to figure out what business model works the best. But I think once they figure out what that business model is, then they would be able to service their quality of customer.
What's interesting is one thing about the league is I noticed like my profile is backed by my LinkedIn account. Mm-hmm. And for me, the league is kind of like a LinkedIn account for those looking to date. Mm-hmm. Now, my LinkedIn account, it got to the point where I can no longer accept a lot of people because of people coming to me because of third and fourth connections on LinkedIn that I'm like, you don't actually know me. And it's like they just want to just be connected for no reason. I'm like, who are you people? Like, I'm trying to connect with individuals that are on my level because I want my LinkedIn page to reflect my business acumen. And so when I've got individuals who are like, Joe Blow, and, I know someone that or I know someone who knows you, then now we're trying to connect. That's kind of where I looked at, the league, where the same kind of metrics that are applied in LinkedIn are applied here, where I'm like, why would you connect the two of us outside of our, say, common business interests? There is a lack of, I think, personal interest that goes in. I think that's where it's missing, because I look at a lot of people, I'm like, well, yeah, I guess we could do business together, but I don't really know anything about this woman other than where she works, where she went to school, and, her surface interest based on the league choices, based on I'm into this league group and that league group and this league group. But outside of that, for people who aren't willing to, I guess, maybe share information, I don't know how that works, why I'm only seeing just kind of business profiles. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's, maybe I'm looking for someone who does something else. Maybe I'm looking at someone who could be into, say, geek culture or things like that I've listed on my page that I don't see any of that. I'm like, well, dude, I'm not trying to interview someone. I'm not looking for, an assistant or an employee. I'm looking for someone to spend time with where we may have liked interests, but that it's got to be more than that. And that's what seems to be missing in the league.
So that's interesting. So I think that that's a feature set that the league could level up on, right? So maybe there is a characteristic of the features where, like you said, they're having the business acumen because it's coming from LinkedIn. So maybe they do connect you with people that would be in your sphere in terms of business, but maybe there's another level within the algorithm where they can say, oh, these two people like to do like skydiving, or these two, maybe it is too business focused.
Yeah.
Versus like having the commonality of the actual activities, the personalities, and those type of things. And I think, honestly, now that I'm talking this through, a really interesting feature set for them could be like, you have the concierge. Yeah. What if that person was actually a matchmaker? Like, what if they went through your profiles and then they could actually add another level, another tier that you can pay for? And that person goes through your profile and they find you 3 very specific persons that are in relation to your activities that you like to do, or you guys both have kids or something that's really important to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that they could literally, because that's a matchmaking service, they could literally charge anywhere from $500 to an extra $1,000 a month, right? As a premium.
Right.
So that could be a feature set that they should definitely consider implementing, considering that it's already sold or propositioned as a premium platform.
You mentioned 2 dating sites earlier. You said Tinder and Hinge. What is first? What is Tinder?
Yeah, so Tinder is a hodgepodge of a bunch of people. So I don't really mess with Tinder too much. I'm not on any of them anymore, but I think with Tinder, what I found was when I was on there, actually I met a really amazing guy from Tinder, but I met a lot of really bad people on Tinder, right? So the thing with Tinder is they're about quantity. So they have millions of people on this platform. And so they don't really source people according to the quality of the relationship. So it's all about how many people they can get in the pool, period, right? Okay. And so Hinge is a little bit different. It's more active. I would say Hinge, I've met more quality people on there in terms of actually going out on dates. That just never transpired. So I don't know that it was a great platform for actually getting to the point of going out on dates, but it was a really good platform for just understanding the dynamic of people from a level that wasn't professional. In some cases, right? You could see what they did, but that wasn't the driving force behind the app. So a lot of the conversation was so basically you have this profile and then it's tell me 2 truths and a lie. So you got a bunch of personality within it versus just oh, this person went to Harvard and they got their PhD at XYZ and then they went on to work at Microsoft, which is very much how the league leads. Versus with Hinge, it's tell me 2 truths and a lie. I did this, and I did this. And you're oh, that's funny. So you can kind of get a feel for their personality versus the other way around. So I think each app kind of complements its own kind of features. But I mean, some people just aren't meant to be on dating apps, period. Right. And so that's something to consider as well.
But it's unfortunate that we live in a world where social media has become so entrenched and ingrained in society where now it's to the point where do we date? Where do we find people? Where do we even go? Because if you're looking for someone in a supermarket, they're walking around in their phone. You're trying to talk to someone, just at a park, whatever. Everyone is so ingrained in this. And even with social media, how do you date if we're connected on social media? I know everything you've done in a day. You know,
That's real.
you're posting every picture what you've done. On Facebook, you're updating. On Tweeting, you're tweeting it out. By the time I call you, what is there to talk about? This is crazy.
You know what, though? I think that's a good point, but I will say this. Like, for me, in my perspective, like, when I have a lot of free time and I'm not dating, you'll see all kinds of content on social media. If I am dating or if I'm doing something like more serious business-wise, you're not really going to see too much of me, right? And so I think that instead of like putting our focus on just these dating apps, maybe there's friends on social media, on your Facebook, maybe there's friends on your Instagram, your LinkedIn that you didn't consider to date that you possibly could be a really good match for. So I think it's really just considering what that pool is, not focusing on dating apps specifically, and just being open-minded all across the board.
This is The Plug.
You know who's the plug.
It's time to get caught up on the hottest in tech.
Keep it locked, you heard?
With Sequoia Blodgett.
I see you, little mama.
I launched my first company, 7 a.m. in 2014 after a long stint of working in the entertainment industry as a commercial and music video director. It was hard. Even though I was venture backed by one of the biggest VCs in the game, I still was so confused as to how to actually run, grow, and scale the company. I didn't understand how to convert customers quickly and efficiently. I didn't understand which marketing tools to use and how to create sales funnels. I didn't understand staying niche in the beginning and not boiling the ocean. I didn't understand how to stay motivated during extreme times of loneliness and not getting the results I was expecting. After several years, we ended up closing the doors. I started studying hundreds of really successful entrepreneurs to find out how they not only kept the lights on, but were scaling rapidly. After officially walking away from my first company in 2016, several years later, I launched Commas, a virtual entrepreneurship resource center. Yes, we're actually a company. I built it to help you guys understand why raising capital too fast will actually hurt you, why you need a team around you to iterate quickly and stay sane, why your business has to stand out because so many people are doing the exact same thing. There are no new ideas, and why it's important not to push your personal life to the back burner. Consider Commas as your entrepreneurship resource guide so you can avoid making the same mistakes that I did. We cover all things from product to marketing to publicity and fundraising. You can learn more about Commas, the actual platform, by visiting commastheseries.com. You can also hit us up on our socials at Commas the Series. Until next week, it's your girl Sequoia, and I'm out.